there inside of the White House as we continue on. Soon, President Biden will make these remarks as well. Certainly some interesting statements coming out of there as we continue on. I do want to bring in right now Chief National Security Correspondent for Fox News, Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we'll take you back to Biden because I know a lot of people wanting to hear what he says. But of course, as you continue to follow this into day 4, maybe what is the latest and what do we expect to hear from Biden momentarily?
Well, Andy, we've just learned that Boeing has accelerated the delivery of 1,000 smart bombs to Israel, and Israel's Air Force took delivery of the bombs from a U.S. air base. That we have confirmed this morning. We also have learned that a second aircraft carrier, the USS Eisenhower, is leaving Norfolk and will be sent to the eastern Mediterranean. It was a pre-scheduled deployment, but they're accelerating that. They should be there within 2 weeks' time, we're told. So that would be 2 aircraft carriers. The USS Ford, of course, was ordered to reposition closer to Israel as a deterrent to Hezbollah, to Iran, and others. They don't expect at this point that either of these aircraft carriers, U.S. aircraft carriers, would be involved in the Gaza operation by any means, but it is to send a deterrent message to Hezbollah. The U.S. is basically rushing aid to Israel. The squadrons of fighter jets that were announced yesterday left the United States in the last 48 hours, and the first tranche of munitions are already on its way. That, according to John Kirby, the NSC coordinator. The Pentagon has basically reached out to U.S. defense industry leaders to accelerate existing contracts for weapon shipments to Israel. Andy?
All right. Still a lot of ongoing situations, a lot of fluid information as well. We also heard from Kirby talking about Iran and being complicit in this. Have we learned any maybe more about that? Because they have come out and said they had nothing to do with this. Maybe are we learning any more as people within the Department of Defense learning any more about maybe their involvement in all of this?
Well, let's remember it was the supreme leader of Iran, spiritual leader, who said that Iran was not involved, but you cannot take him at his word. And in fact, all of the evidence on the ground points to Iranian involvement, whether it was the funding for the last 30 years, the provision of weaponry, and also what appears to be a very highly trained group of Palestinians who are calling themselves Hamas, but also included Islamic Jihad, which over the years has been 100% supported by Iran and created by Iran. But is there any concrete evidence linking this particular attack at this moment in time? U.S. intelligence officials that we've spoken to say they have not seen that evidence yet. Obviously, they're looking very closely. And even Israeli officials say that they have not been able to prove Iran's involvement. But they, again, given the links between Hamas, Hezbollah, and these are Iran's proxy groups, Islamic Jihad as well. And so there is very little possibility that Hamas could have carried out this sophisticated of an attack without an outside help. And that outside help most likely came from Iran.
Definitely. As well as, of course, they are denying that, but certainly reading between the lines and kind of everything points to Iran as well. I do want to put up a tweet you sent out from earlier, Jennifer Griffin, talking about the Israeli defense minister expected to take part in the NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels via video conference. Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, is en route to Brussels. Maybe what do we expect to learn on Thursday from that meeting? And of course, that person, the Israeli defense minister, being there is a big deal as we're learning information. I imagine intel and conversations going back and forth. Maybe what do we expect from that meeting?
Well, this is very significant, and I think it's important for people to understand. First of all, Israel is not a member of NATO. NATO was formed, obviously, to counter Russia and involves European allies as well as the United States. But Israel has a special role, particularly since it's been quietly sending representatives to the Ukraine contact group, which is also going to be meeting in the coming days in Brussels. And that's something that Defense Secretary Austin has led for the last year and a half since Russia invaded Ukraine. The connection between Ukraine and this Hamas operation into Israel, I think, could be lost on people. And so I want to explain what we know at this time. First of all, who benefits from the world focusing on Israel and the fight in Gaza and the attack by Hamas? Putin definitely benefits because the world's attention is taken off of Ukraine temporarily. That's why it's significant that Defense Secretary Austin and the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs, C.Q. Brown, is heading to Brussels to meet with NATO defense ministers. These are pre-scheduled meetings, but the fact that the Israeli defense minister is calling into that meeting shows that this is going to need a united world front against this terrible, terrible terrorist attack and against what Iran, this new nexus of activity between Iran and Russia. We've seen on the battlefield in Ukraine how Iranian drones are being used by the Russians. The Russians couldn't carry out any number of the attacks that they have without those Iranian drones. So the relationship right now between Vladimir Putin and the leaders in Tehran should be scrutinized, and people should understand that there is a link between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening on the ground in Gaza right now.
All right, Jennifer Griffin, the Chief National Security Correspondent at Fox News. Of course, we're going to keep this shot up as President Biden expected to speak momentarily. We might have just gotten a 2-minute warning, so we'll break away. I will tell you when that happens, so we're still waiting on it. But I do want to get back, potentially, you said Boeing and another aircraft carrier going to the Middle East region, to the Eastern Mediterranean as well. And we also saw maybe a statement of unity with the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Germany as well, and people trying to mediate this as well. You also mentioned NATO. Do you think there will be some mediation from outside countries involved in this to try to maybe cool off tensions, to ease tensions a little bit, as we're in day number 4 right now?
I think that it's premature to talk about any sort of intervention or talks of a ceasefire, because that would be like talking about a ceasefire between the U.S. and al-Qaeda after 9/11. Right now, the Israelis are very clear. They're going to go into Gaza. They're going to clear out the Hamas cells. They're going to rescue those hostages. There's still 150 hostages, likely to include Americans, in Gaza right now. So right now, the goal, I think, for Israel and the United States is to create a united front with other European leaders so that Iran and its proxy groups don't try to take advantage of this moment and spread this conflict. If Hezbollah, over the next 48 hours, you should watch the northern border of Israel very carefully. If Hezbollah decides to get involved and fire its rockets into Israel, that will mean that Iran has a plan to try and spread this beyond the Gaza Strip. One thing I'd like to point out is that those aircraft carriers, U.S. aircraft carriers that are going to the Eastern Mediterranean, they have no intention of being involved in the Gaza conflict with Israel. This is a deterrent message that they're trying to send to adventurous like Hezbollah, Iran, not to take advantage of this moment while Israel is carrying out its operation into Gaza.
All right, Jennifer, we just see President Biden step up. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's dive into what he has to say here on the ongoing situation in Israel.
Literally, when the pure, unadulterated evil is unleashed on this world. The people of Israel lived through one such moment this weekend. The bloody hands of the terrorist organization Hamas, a group whose stated purpose for being is to kill Jews. This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered, not just killed, slaughtered in Israel. Among them, at least 14 American citizens killed. Parents butchered using their bodies to try to protect their children. Stomach-turning reports of babies being killed. Entire families slain. Young people massacred while attending a musical festival to celebrate peace. To celebrate peace. Women raped, assaulted, paraded as trophies. Families hid their fear for hours and hours, desperately trying to keep their children quiet to avoid drawing attention. And thousands of wounded, alive but carrying with them the bullet holes and the shrapnel wounds and the memory of what they endured. You all know these traumas never go away. There's still so many families desperately waiting to hear the fate of their loved ones, not knowing if they're alive or dead or hostages. Infants in their mother's arms, grandparents in wheelchairs, Holocaust survivors abducted and held hostage. Hostages whom Hamas has now threatened to execute in violation of every code of human morality. It's abhorrent. The brutality of Hamas, these Bloodthirstiness brings to mind the worst rampages of ISIS. This is terrorism. But sadly, for the Jewish people, it's not new. This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. Its stated purpose is the annihilation of the State of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. They use Palestinian civilians as human shields. Hamas offers nothing but terror and bloodshed with no regard to who pays the price. The loss of innocent life is heartbreaking. Like every nation in the world, Israel has the right to respond, indeed has a duty to respond to these vicious attacks. I just got off the phone with a third call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I told him, the United States experience what Israel is experiencing, our response would be swift, decisive, and overwhelming. We also discussed how democracies like Israel and the United States are stronger and more secure when we act according to the rule of law. Terrorists purposely target civilians, kill them. We uphold the laws of war, the law of war. It matters. There's a difference. Today, Americans across the country are praying for all those families that have been ripped apart. A lot of us know how it feels. It leaves a black hole in your chest when you lose family. Feeling like you're being sucked in. The anger, the pain, the sense of hopelessness. This is what they mean by a human tragedy, an atrocity on an appalling scale. But we're going to continue to stand united, supporting the people of Israel who are suffering unspeakable losses and opposing the hatred and violence of terrorism. My team has been in near constant communication with our Israeli partners and partners all across the region and the world from the moment this crisis began. We're surging additional military assistance, including ammunition and interceptors, to replenish Iron Dome. We're going to make sure that Israel does not run out of these critical assets to defend its cities and its citizens. My administration has consulted closely with Congress throughout this crisis. And when Congress returns, we're going to ask them to take urgent action to fund the national security requirements of our critical partners. This is not about party or politics. This is about the security of our world, the security of the United States of America. We now know that American citizens are among those being held by Hamas. I've directed my team to share intelligence and deploy additional experts from across the United States government to consult with and advise Israeli counterparts on hostage recovery efforts. Because as president, I have no higher priority than the safety of Americans being held hostage around the world. The United States has also enhanced our military force posture in the region to strengthen our deterrence. The Department of Defense has moved the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Eastern Mediterranean and bolstered our fighter aircraft presence. And we stand ready to move in additional assets as needed. Let me say again, to any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Don't. Our hearts may be broken, but our resolve is clear. Yesterday, I also spoke with the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, and UK to discuss the latest developments with our European allies and coordinate our united response. This comes on top of days of steady engagement with partners across the region. We're also taking steps at home. In cities across the United States of America, police departments have stepped up security around centers of Jewish life. The Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation are working closely with state and local law enforcement and Jewish community partners to identify and disrupt any domestic threat that could emerge in connection with these horrific attacks. This is a moment for the United States to come together, to grieve with those who are mourning. Let's be real clear. There is no place for hate in America. Not against Jews, not against Muslims, not against anybody. We reject. What we reject is terrorism. We condemn the indiscriminate evil, just as we've always done. That's what America stands for. You know, just over 50 years ago, I was thinking about it this morning, talking to the Secretary of State, the Vice President in my office. Over 50 years ago, as a young senator, I visited Israel for the first time as a newly elected senator. And I had a long, long trip, a meeting with Golda Meir in her office just before the Yom Kippur War. And I guess she could see the consternation on my face as she described what was being faced, they were facing. We walked outside in that sort of hallway outside her office to have some photos. She looked at me all of a sudden and said, "Would you like to have a photograph?" And so I got up and followed her out. We were standing there silent, looking at the press. She could tell, I guess, I was concerned. She leaned over and whispered to me, she said, "Don't worry, Senator Biden. We have a secret weapon here in Israel." My word is what she said. We have no place else to go. We have no place else to go. For 75 years, Israel has stood as the ultimate guarantor of the security of Jewish people around the world, so that the atrocities of the past could never happen again. And let there be no doubt, the United States has Israel's back. We will make sure the Jewish and democratic state of Israel can defend itself today, tomorrow, as we always have. It's as simple as that. These atrocities have been sickening. We're with Israel. Let's make no mistake. Thank you.
Mr. President, what was your reaction